Chen Zzu, the Chinese student who was convicted of R-ing 10 people and potentially as many as 58, will not be deported back to China at the end of his sentence. And I'll tell you something else. He received translation services into Chinese from English when he was being interviewed by the police, even though he's an academic at a university in Britain. Hello everyone, this is Andre Walker. Thanks so much for watching this video. Please do support our sponsor today, who are G Live TV Podcast. The link is in the description. We're launching on Saturday with some programming, and please, we want you to subscribe so we can hit the ground running. Well, I am shocked by what I saw with this Chen Zzu. Forgive me. I was about to say forgive me if I pronounced the name wrong. Personally, I don't give a toss. He should call himself Keith if he's in England. Anyway, he was interviewed by police and he was receiving all these translations. They were asking him questions and then there was an interpreter telling him the answers to the questions. I find that absolutely staggering, and he kept saying no comment. And I'll tell you why I find it staggering. He originally started, I think, in 2017 at Queen's University in Belfast and then went to do a postgraduate at UCL, University College London. And so he is somebody who's completely fluent in English. I remember when I worked at the House of Commons, we had a Polish gentleman who used to phone me up. He used to write to us in Polish and demand an interpreter. And you know something? I spoke to the interpreter and the interpreter said, look, he can speak perfect English. What he wants to do is sue you for discrimination. So I wrote a letter back to him telling him that he was going to contact us in English in future, and I didn't give a toss who he sued. And of course that suddenly shut him up. But that's not the purpose of this video, the way people are taking the mick. It's what may happen next, because, you know, there's a potential that some of these people were underage. And if they are, then if he's convicted in China, he will receive the death penalty. Nothing wrong with that, as far as I'm concerned. But what it does do is it means that human rights lawyers, the people like Keir Starmer and Richard Harmer, no good karma with them. Hey, they will now fight his extradition to China, his deportation to China. It's not an extradition. And they will say, well, he's going to receive cruel and unusual punishment in China. Not bothered about the cruel and unusual punishment that takes place at HMP Woodhill, by the way. But they will then say, we can't deport to a country where he may receive the death penalty for the crimes he has committed. Because remember, even though he's been convicted in the United Kingdom, the crimes that he's committed were principally in the People's Republic of China. And can you imagine what's going to happen in a few years' time when the human rights lawyers turn up and he's received £1 billion in public aid, and then suddenly they're going to stand up and say, well, his human rights are that he has to remain in the United Kingdom to avoid cruel and unusual punishment. Because I've said this before today, our own people are suffering, our own people are in danger, our own people are being hurt, but we care more about the baddies, don't we? He is a first-class citizen in a second-class country. I've used that phrase plenty of times before. And what will happen now to this man is, yes, he will be convicted of lots more crimes. And yes, that will be in conjunction with what happens with the People's Republic, in the People's Republic of China. But what will happen next is that all of the human rights lawyers will swarm around and make an awful lot of money trying to protect him. We need to end this European Convention on Human Rights. And I'll tell you why. Because originally the purpose of it was to protect you from an omnipotent government. But now it's about an omnipotent government forcing you to do what they tell you. The whole thing has been flipped on its head. You know, it's no longer the right to free speech. What it's become, it starts with the right to free speech. Then it's a right to free speech with caveats. And what it's turned into is a manifesto for removing your free speech. And I'll just explain that again, just in case you're confused. I was born with inalienable rights, like they say in the United States of America, to free speech. We brought in the European Convention on Human Rights, which encapsulated and encased and guaranteed my freedom of speech. Except when there were some occasions that perhaps that wasn't a good idea. Those occasions have grown and grown and grown to the extent now that the European Convention on Human Rights guarantee for free speech is a guarantee that I no longer have it, that I've lost it for the first time. My guarantee to family life, let me tell you that. Originally, my guarantee for family life meant the following, that you couldn't arrest me and put half my family in Theresienstadt and the other half in Auschwitz. That was the right to family life. It's now turned into a right of somebody to commit horrendous crimes and stay in the country because they have children. Now, I would argue that my right to family life, and certainly the family life of people who are victims of crime, have been significantly undermined by that so-called right to family life and the whole thing about cruel and unusual punishment and torture. I mean, that's just gone in the bin ages ago. I just think that we have got this so badly wrong. And I think personally, we need to change the law. And I'll tell you how we change the law. You know, with this Chen Zzu, I think let's send him back to China. Let's say to China, do you know something about this guy? He's done all this in your country. We've convicted him. We've prosecuted him. We've done whatever. We're sticking him on a plane. Not tomorrow. Now we're sticking him on a plane and you deal with him. And if they want to string him up, let them string him up. You know, at the end of the day, you're talking about somebody who met people on WeChat, which is a Chinese chat service, offered them a drink, put GHB in the drink. That is paint stripper, by the way. It's paint stripper, and it means that you drift in and out of consciousness, as you can imagine you would if you drank paint stripper. And then dreadful stuff, by the way. But he gave them paint stripper to drink, and then filmed what he was getting up to with them. Look, string him up. Doesn't bother me. That is the quality of the person we're bringing over. But also, it raises another question about the vetting of migrants. Because, you know something, he'd done all this in his own country. He had a phone full of all this filth. And then you ask yourself, where were the checks on this man? Where was the due diligence? How many other people are coming over? You know, I've got a friend of mine who came from Bangladesh to study English. And he went to the English language college that he was studying on. He discovered it was a semi-detached house in Hounslow. And when he knocked on the door of a registered college, they said they'd never had a student actually come to the building and were quite shocked that he'd done it. Because they said the purpose of your certificate is so that you can continue to live in the United Kingdom whilst you're quote unquote studying English in our college. Absolutely and unbelievably crazy situation where we're not checking anyone at all. So we'll have the P's and SA's and R's and all of these people come into our country on the student visa. Now, I will say one thing. Student visas are a good thing. People do bring money into the country. But I will say something else. Our universities ought to be principally for our own people, and that is starting to change. Immigration in universities is not necessarily a good thing. And this is a particularly egregious example of the problems that can arise, but it's not the only example. So I'm going to go the other way to everybody else. I don't want him to serve out his sentence. In fact, I don't even care if he serves his sentence at all. I want him on a plane to Beijing, and I want us to hand him over to the Chinese authorities and say, this man is your problem. And if you send us another wrong and like that again, then we're going to ban every Chinese student from University College London, and we're going to pick up the bill. And then every single other pest that you send to any other university will ban all Chinese students from them as well. Until next time, goodbye.